Hello and welcome to week 9 of the FUT Weekly podcast, nearly in double digits. And we have a gameplay podcast for you. And we have Japes back and with some new tactics. Hello.
Yeah, hello, Ben. Glad to be back and glad to have found a tactic that, at least for right now, seems to be fun and rewarding, which has made, after, an episode of where I feel like everything, the sky was falling and I just what's the point? Now I'm in a mental state of hey, maybe this is kind of fun or can be fun. Maybe the potential's there. So I'm excited to share.
Yeah, that'll be good. And we also have with us, as we often do, Josh. Hello, welcome back.
Hello, yeah, I'm enjoying the game as much as I can at the moment with the impending Player of the Month Mbappe on the horizon. So, get the fun in while we can, I suppose.
They had better obscenely price that.
I said yesterday on X that Player of the Month Mbappe, because he's supposedly getting an inform today. So if they do what they did last year, which is to give a +1, now they only brought that in halfway through last year, so maybe they're not doing that this year. He would be 93 rated as Player of the Month, but even as a 92, that's going to be a 4 million coin card. So that's 18 88 rated squads. So
wonderful.
Good. I think it might be, it's either going to be the most completed SBC because it's going to be incredible value, or it'll be the least completed SBC of all time. There will be no middle ground. There's no position they can put it into, because if they put it at the price it should be, it's going to be almost impossible for people to complete without spending money. And if they put it at the price that would allow, or an ability for people to grind it, everyone will grind it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do for that. I think, hopefully, it'll just be very unobtainable. But someone who is obtainable for us on these gameplay podcasts, who was on a few weeks ago, is AlexBee, gameplay expert. Hello.
Hello there, thank you very much for having me on again. And myself, I definitely will not be doing an Mbappe Player of the Month because it's going to be very expensive, and I just don't have that in my locker, really.
If it was not expensive, would you do it?
Well, I actually run a Road to Glory this year, and my aim was to complete every single SBC that came out, like player SBC, and I managed to do it up until the end of the Player of the Month that have just finished, like Son and 𝘵𝗲𝗄𝘀, because they just, Son when he first came out was like 700k and was, pretty good value. Then 𝘭der𝘬𝘬 went up and he went to 1 million. So I've still managed to do every player SBC, but the Player of the Month are the ones that I'm at the minute. I'm kind of going, no, I'm not going to do it. So yeah, if it was reasonable, maybe, but I then wouldn't be able to carry on doing all the other SBCs as well. So who knows?
Yeah. Who's been the standout for you in terms of SBC play you probably wouldn't have done, but you did because you were doing all of them?
To be honest, Declan Rice is probably one of my most favourite ones that I've used. I think as a proper DM, especially as well on this year's game, I feel the middle of the park is not used as much, so it's get the ball out to the wings, so you almost don't have to worry about having a player in the middle who might be a bit heavier. But saying that, he has press proven, so it just means when he gets pressed, he can actually out-dribble it really easily. He's been phenomenal. I think he's probably been one of the most favourite SBCs, but I also do have a card that isn't an SBC, which maybe we'll touch on shortly, that I think is just absolutely unbelievably good.
Yeah, well, we do normally do a player review to start with, so yeah, who is that player?
It is the new Morientes that came out in the Triple Threat Hero promo. Now, the reason why is mainly because I quite like a big man. They're just, you can get them into your team. Have one big man and another one around it who's quick, agile. It works really well. I like to have a complete game, not just keeping it on the floor. If I can cross it, if I can find some backstick headers, I'll go for it. And when you're playing against Van Dijk, because Van Dijk has aerial, he's so difficult to beat in the air. Even from corners for me, he's got over 110 goals, I think. He's crazy. It's been really difficult to find a striker that could compete with Van Dijk, essentially. And then they released this, Morientes, that has aerial plus. He has power header. He's 6'1". His aggression's okay at 76, 98 heading accuracy. It just means that basically I can play a lock onto Morientes and say, right, I can compete with Van Dijk if I want in the air for crosses, or if they've got a 𝘵𝗵𝗽 at fullback or a 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦 or whoever, I'm just going to move Morientes and literally just put it into the back stick with an L1 square cross and just score goal after goal after goal. It's quite funny, really. But yeah, he's unbelievable. He's so good.
That's actually very relevant to something we've been asked this week, gameplay related. Real 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘬 says, has anyone had any success via crossing? Struggling to get my Giroud involved in the air. And actually, quite a lot of people message in when we say crossing is really strong and say, I don't seem to be able to score any. What am I doing wrong? So maybe Alex, as an expert on crossing, what would you recommend people do to actually score from them?
Well, the key thing is the build up early. So the whole point with cross is actually having the player there to attack the cross with space, essentially. A lot of people just get the ball down the wing and think, like in real life, you can just kind of yeet it into the box and, your player will kind of compete. They don't really work like that. So as you're building up, if you're 35 yards out, you need to trigger that striker or whoever it is to get on that run early. So tap that L1 button while pointing the left stick towards them. They then start making the run towards the box. And then when you're out on the wing, it's about going, okay, can we isolate that matchup? As I said, even Morientes against Van Dijk, yes, he has a bit of a chance, but it's still very difficult to beat some of these centre-backs. So then it's about going, okay, well, how can we try and make it basically a battle where you're always going to win it? Using the creative runs to L1 and then right stick flick that player to the back post can work really well. Or doing one of my personal favourites, which is just having the ball out on the wing, player lock-in, switching to that striker, moving them to the back post, front post, wherever you want, and then just asking for the L1 squares. That can be super strong. Or even just when you get the ball out on the wing, triggering that runner and essentially making sure that the crosser is slightly, the attacker, is slightly ahead of the person that's crossing the ball. Then that way you can get the proper whip on the cross and kind of find the advantage from there. But yeah, they are super strong. They do take a bit of setup, I would say, and a bit of kind of, toying with the opponent. And the idea is that you do it 1 or 2 times. When you say player lock, for example, that opponent then will see you play a lock and they might really put loads of pressure on the ball holder, pulling out like a centre back or a full back and be aggressive. And then that's where you can either quickly change back to the player on the ball from the player lock or look to pass to someone else. It kind of just gives you so many different avenues to confuse the opponent.
I will say as well, like I've enjoyed crossing a lot recently, but I've started crossing less to try and score from the immediate cross. And crossing into the front post area, especially when people are playing like narrow defensively, but pull a wing back out to come and press the person on the ball. Depending on if you've got 2 strikers or if you've got midfielders on free roam, very often they'll move into the space between the wing back and the centre back. And I don't know why, but when you just flip that ball into the box, but it like close to you, people don't really know which player to control in their back line. And most people are on airball switching and so get switched to a player and aren't like, they just get a bit discombobulated and it can open up so much space in the box. It's something I've started adding way more to my game just to like progress the ball into the box without having to, go to the byline and cut back.
The key point there for me, because it's happened to me now a couple times, the airball switching is like kind of broken in those instances. Like it chooses the wrong person for you 90% of the time. And what that ends up meaning as an attacker is you're not immediately pressed. Like you have a second and the entire AI backline then takes a step back further, allowing you for either an easy pass across the face of goal or to get enough space to kind of shape your player correctly to either finesse it or hit a power shot at the near post. For me, it's just when I've started to notice it, it's because I feel like I'm switched to the wrong person. And it takes my brain a second to be like, oh, shoot, that is not who I thought I was going to switch to when they dinked it there. And especially if you have players like that little dink at the near post as like an X pass or a square pass. If you have players like that 𝗬𝘃𝗀 with the whipped pass, they will even curl that dink around the player that's just in front of them so that you can take it down more easily. It's really, really strong.
I think the thing to add as well, and like you said there, Josh, it can make them so much better. When you can take the touchdown or flick it on, can be so much more beneficial because heading's manual, meaning wherever you aim your left analog stick, the ball's going to go pretty much 99% of the time. So people really struggle to actually get headers even on target. My advice there is if you aim at the center of the goal, you'll naturally have like a sway either to the left or to the right. And then as you start to get more comfortable with headers, you can then try and put them more in the corner. But yeah, like you've both said, taking the touchdown, looking for that flick on or touch and then get the shot off yourself can also be a very viable option.
Yeah, I was going to ask actually. I'm all right at time finishing, but I've always struggled on timing headers.
Oh, Ben, let's switch. I'm great at scoring headers. I have like no real issue with that. I generally put them on target, can put them in the corner, but like I cannot seem to hit the timed green stuff to save my life. So part of me feels like I would be a much better overall FIFA player, like win a lot more games if I managed to figure out time finishing. I just haven't done it.
We did have a question on this actually. 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦𝘍 asking, how important do you feel timed finishing is to learn? Who on the pod uses it consistently, and where would you put it in a list of importancy in terms of things to learn on the game? And also, does connection affect it? I learned a few cycles back and can do it in squad battles, but whenever I play champs or rivals, I panic and fluff the shots and regret trying it. Any advice? Actually, just quickly before we go to Alex, Josh, do you do it?
I started doing it. So playing with a 48 rated team means you need to use everything at your disposal to make it work. And I couldn't believe how good time finishing was. Like the difference between like normal, like trying to just hit a normal shot with that kind of, with a player that's got 50 shooting, and timing it was night and day. And all I could think of was, how many times have I had what I would consider like an easy shot and the keeper's got a save, or like it's just gone wide, or even when you've tried to like bend a shot into the corner and it's been blocked by like an outstretched leg. I'm like, if I green those, does it go in? And I've started doing it now on my main account with my main team. I can't believe I've not been doing it before. I think it's just one of those things that people go, oh no, I'll just get myself into a good enough shooting position and that'll be fine. But like, yeah, there is going to be some frustrating moments when you red time it and it fluffs wide. I can't tell you the number of times I've red timed it into the back of the net though. So like, I definitely think it's something that's worth giving a shot, especially if you're somebody who's like, how I have like 10 shots a game and I'm only scoring 1 goal. Start just trying to time it, because it makes so much difference. I can't believe I've not done it earlier.
Yeah, it's interesting because I said I do green time it, but actually I always err on the side of being late. I would say I'd probably green time like 50% of my shots as a result of that. It may even be less depending on how like hard I'm trying, if that makes sense. Because yeah, there is always that risk factor. And I'll basically time it a bit earlier and try and get it and risk it if the shot's from further out. There are ways of making it less risky, I suppose. But Alex, anything to add on that in terms of importance of it and things?
It's massively important, purely for the fact of, a lot of people complain about RNG in the game, random number generator. If you're going to take 100 shots at the same angle, the same body position with the same player from the same place from the goal, you're going to have different variables where it's going to go wide, it's going to hit the woodwork, it's going to go straight down the goalkeeper's throat, it's going to go in, 70 times into the corner. When you use time finishing, you have more power, you have more accuracy, so it reduces that RNG, meaning you're going to score more goals. In terms of how do you learn it, you can go into skill games and then go to practice scenarios, and you get the side on camera, in like the attacking scenario it's called, and you can just practice against the AI. You can do it there. You can do it in squad battles. When you get in online, obviously, yes, there is the connection thing to take into account. But basically, if you start with finesse shots, they're the easiest ones to learn, because the finesse shot animation is the same for everybody. It's a very similar animation. While you'll have different players, you have different stride lengths with a power shot and with headers and with volleys and so on. So it can be quite difficult to learn on the others. But you've got to be willing to take that risk, because at the end of the day, if you just carry on sticking with just normal shooting, you're going to continuously have that RNG element, and you want to try and take that out of the game. One thing that I would kind of add on from that is that time finishing is so good, but something that I actually think is even better and above it, and depends on who you are as a player, is precision shooting. Last year it was called semi-shooting, it's precision this year. Just basically turning that on, changing from assisted shooting to precision shooting, will give you more power on your shots anyway. And essentially where you aim with your left analog stick is where the ball goes. I've seen a lot of complaints from people saying that, shooting inside the box is really unreliable. They go straight at the goalkeeper, they go wide, it hits the woodwork. I haven't found shooting to be unreliable because of precision shooting. What you'll notice if you do go and give it a try and put it on, most people don't aim correctly when they're trying to shoot. They're aiming at the corner flag. And basically think of it like a power shot. Where you aim is where the ball goes. But if you can nail precision shooting, that is just even better than time finishing. But if you can combine precision shooting with timed finishing, then you are just going to... Basically, if you get a shot off, you score, essentially. Like they have to have goalkeeper movement to try and stop it. It just makes it so much stronger. The kind of caveat to it is that if you are a very, very good player on the sticks, you do loads of skill cancels, left stick dribbling inside the box and so on, so you constantly move in the left stick, then precision shooting probably isn't good, because you have those quick snaps where you have to then aim at goal as you've just done some fancy footwork. Me, myself, I'm a little bit of a boomer, so I don't really have the greatest feet, so running precision shooting is fine for me.
I've got a question on the precision shooting, because I loved it at the beginning of the game. and I turned it off essentially when people started banging Travellas and finesse shots from distance against me, and I couldn't replicate it on precision shooting. And I wonder if you can do, or if it's just you use the fact that people think you're going to Travella and finesse to then try and create better shooting options a little bit close to goal.
Basically, that's where precision shooting has its biggest flaw. Imagine you're running in from the sideline and you're really narrow to the goal and you're trying to aim far post, or you're going for those, when you play it short off a corner and you're trying to go for a Travella from like the ridiculous angles. Basically, if you look at the front post and the back post, and you look at that angle from where you're stood, they're so close to one another on the left analog stick, it's basically impossible to aim at far post on precision shooting. So if you're someone that constantly looks for them, then yeah, it's probably not going to be worth running. But as long as you come in a little bit more, then you will start to understand, okay, yeah, I can get this in the far post. You just have to be so delicate on the stick. Because if you really, look at the goal, on the analog stick, those posts are so close to one another, it really requires you to be delicate. So the harsher angle that you take, then that's where precision shooting is just almost impossible to get it in. So yeah, it does have its con there, but I would argue for me, I don't go for those Travellas and those finesses from those ridiculous angles. It's more about, if I get the ball inside the 18-yard box, on the edge of the 18-yard box, can I get that shot off and be rewarded with a shot on goal? And you will be.
Yeah, it's great advice, and there'll be more great advice. I think after this break, we'll talk Japes tactic and plenty more in just a second. Hello, welcome back after the break. Right, Japes tactics. We know already, or the eagle-eared listeners will probably have realized these are false 9 tactics. So 4-3-3 brackets 5, right?
That's the brackets we like.
Yeah, because often people mention false 9 on the podcast, and I'll get a message saying, "What is the false 9?" Because obviously that isn't how it's labeled in the game, right? It's 4-3-3 brackets 5. So with this tactic, do you want to explain about, what you've done with it? You might as well run through the actual tactics themselves, which I'm sure will add to the tactic bank. And I don't know whether you're planning to share these on Twitter, are you, or anything like that? But
yeah, I haven't. So I have been running this 4-3-3-5. The defense is set on balanced with width at 50 and depth at 60. So I would say extraordinarily balanced. I don't like 71 depth because it is against the 4-3-2-1 racetrack style players. It is too easy to just beat that and get countered. It's so easy to get beaten by it at a higher level. Now, that's not to say it doesn't have its merits depending on where you are, but it's not for me. On the offense or in the attack, I use balanced build up as well. It gives you the ability to go fast or slow depending on what the situation needs. And for chance creation, I use forward runs. And I think that this is direct passing has been extremely popular. I think forward runs is really, really strong this year with how well kind of cutbacks work. And it's forward runs seems to actually get your wingers to act like wingers. Like, it's something to be cognizant of in the midfield and as far as what it does. But what it ultimately does for me is it creates a lot more movement. And for the false 9 to be successful, you need a lot of movement. And you're not able to trigger all of that movement by yourself by just using R1 or L1. So forward run seems to help a lot with that. I've seen some people say they've had some success running possession as their chance creation. So if you're not digging the forward runs, you find it leaves you too vulnerable. You could try that as well. For width, we're on 40, players in the box 3, corners 2, free kicks 2. So like narrow-ish. But the players in the box on 3 is also meant to kind of counteract the forward runs a little bit. If you have a lot of players in the box on forward runs, your entire midfield is going to try to make runs deep into your opponent's box. Having it on 40 or slightly lower means maybe one midfielder at a time will do it. For my left wing and right wing, they're entirely untouched, so totally balanced. My center forward, I actually give the false 9 instruction and then select stay forward. And what this actually means is when you win the ball back, and so either in build up or even when you're attacking, when they're starting build up, they're starting close to the center backs and then they move away. So it makes the AI on the center backs actually react to what they're doing. If they're unbalanced or come back, they're so far away from the center backs just totally keep their shape. So you want to get those center backs moving. The two CMs are entirely balanced and untouched. My CDM I have on tight mark, stay back, and deep lying playmaker. My general tip to people is like, just go buy 𝘭𝘀𝘀𝘀 de Jong because he is exceptional in this role, and largely because he has a lot of the passing statistics, along with being like fairly decent at interceptions and like pretty fast as well. So he's like still a nuisance defensively. But the idea here is this player is going to kind of like orchestrate build up. They get into like, there will be situations where you'll play the ball to like your winger, to your CM, or back to the winger or the fullback, and you're like a little bit trapped. And with the playmaker instruction, they'll move into a spot to give you an option to pass it when you are trapped. Sometimes they'll also drop deep with your CBs to help you play out of a press. Really, really like it. And then the idea of tight mark is, whether it's a 4-3-2-1 or whether it's a 4-2-3-1 style formation, oftentimes there's like one of the center forwards or the attacking mid is like the focal point of the counter for folks. And using tight mark means that this player is marking their player a little bit more tightly, and you have the opportunity to put in a tackle really, really fast. So a lot of people I know love cut passing lanes, and I think cut passing lanes has its merits and works well, especially in a 2DM setup. But I would rather just, at this point, like if it's a 4-3-2 I'm playing against, have my DM sit and mark one of the attackers, and then I can at least match up my other two defenders on their defenders. So does it always come off perfectly? Of course it doesn't. It's how it works, but I do like it. And then my left back and right back, you have on overlap, goalkeeper comes for crosses, and sweeper keeper. And that is what I've been using. I would say my average, I score a lot of goals with it. You will concede, but once you kind of get used to the patterns of play, you have to be a little bit more disciplined defensively to like slow the counter down sometimes. But I finished 18-2 last weekend league with it. So pretty good weekend for I would call it like non-meta tactic.
Nice.
Heavy rundown.
Yeah, that was a lot of info to take in, but I'm sure people can listen back through it. And if they want to take down the tactics, they could put them in as they listen. The thing that we were going to move on to is personnel for this tactic. And seeing as you shared your team on the Support of Content podcast this week, why don't I share my own, because I'm playing the same tactic, and you can tell me whether it works for this tactic, what improvements might need to be made, and that will probably help the listeners too. But it seems to be working pretty well. So I've got the road to knockout Klaus, now 86 at right back, got Varane at centre back, Tomori, the other centre back, 𝘭𝘪𝘀𝘀𝘀 in goal. This is pretty much all untradeable. And then left back is Olga Carmona, who is the Centurions Evo, although I've pretty much completed Bakker, who'll be going in after that. And then I've got Lampard at right centre mid, got him out of a base icon pack. Centurions Zanetti as the central defensive midfielder. The legend Masri Centurions, the box-to-box Evo at left centre mid. And Ronaldinho as the false 9, should say he is not untradeable. And then 𝘵𝘃𝗍 as the right wing and Zola as the left wing. A very lucky icon pack there.
Is that an Evo 𝘵𝘃?
Yeah, it is. And actually, I wonder whether he might be one of the players that you're like, not sure he's quite right here.
I think having pace on the wings is super like obviously helpful there. I think having finesse shot is really, really nice as well. But I think for your playstyle, Ben, I actually think 𝘵𝘃𝗍 is probably fine, because you're going to get in situations where you isolate enough that you'll be able to pull off a skill move and then send either your center mid or your center forward on their way.
Yeah, I actually think he has been fine since I switched to engine from marksman. Bit better in terms of those winger type stats with an engine, but there are probably better options out there. I mean, there'll be plenty of better options out there. Zola is pretty good in that wide left wing position, but also sort of lacks that top end pace. So they're both similar in that kind of sense. I think in that false 9 position, though, obviously Ronaldinho is phenomenal there, but I think there'll be cheaper options you can use, Japes, I'm sure.
Well, I was just gonna say I use gold Griezmann.
Yeah, okay.
So like, you don't have to get 5 million coins to make this formation work.
Yeah. And then what about the midfield balance? Because obviously Masri, Zanetti, Lampard, the player who's impressed me the least is definitely Lampard. What kind of midfielder would you recommend?
He's not fast enough or quick enough. Honestly, Masri is like a great type there. I find the players that I enjoy most have like a decent interception stat, but are insanely like quick and fast. So the star of the show for me is Sawa. She's like truly amazing and fits that role. I think you could use like Putellas or Bonmati, but there are plenty of situations where your CM will be doing a couple things. One, obviously like passing, they have to move into good spots. Two, they're going to have to hold possession in like a pretty tight window. And then also this formation with forward runs creates these interesting movements for the CM where based on how the center forward, left wing, and like left back, we'll say on like that side, interact, the CM will decide to like make an attacking run into space beyond the back line or like open up for like a through pass and try to like break the line. And having a player with some pace there helps a ton.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like insane top line speed, but having a pacey player there really can go a long way. And so like if I'm thinking about constructing the squad and like where to spend my coins, CM is a place that I think is very, very important to success with this formation.
I've got to say, when I've used the 4-3-3 false 9, my right centre mid has been road to the knockout Modric, and he is wonderful for me in that knowing when to make the forward run. He's got enough pace. I'm usually playing with a shadow that he can kind of get in behind people and has enough pace to run past players. He's got that mad interception. I mean, with a shadow, he's on 99 interceptions. But the other thing he has is Trivela, so you can cut inside and Trivela on his strong foot. But he also has whipped pass as well. So if he makes the run slightly wider, you've then got the ability to cross as well. I definitely think I would say that the centre mid that you feel you play down that side more is probably the most important player in a 4-3-3 false 9, because they have to do so much in the team, and they will be the player that is like the extra. They're the extra player when you go against that back line. When the defense is marking up, it's that run from midfield that isn't tracked that's going to be the thing that breaks a like well-organized defense down.
Yeah, I feel like one of the best budget options might be Crystal Dunn, right?
Yeah, I think she'd be great there. You could easily put this false 9 setup together with the US women. Like what you've got like Sophia Smith and Trinity Rodman and Mallory Swanson, and then you could obviously use like Alex Morgan. Because having finesse shot in that false 9 role does come in handy.
Speaking of which, I got some nice rage quits with that end of an era Rapinoe last night. It's a very good card to use.
So Alex, actually, in terms of false 9, have you played it much before? Any questions for Japes, I guess? Anything you think might help listeners when they're thinking about this that you might be able to ask?
I played a bit of it the other week, but I didn't really give it too many games, to be honest with you. I was actually playing a bit of the 4-3-3-2 over the past week or so, which is the one with the...
Same setup, just with a striker.
Yeah, just normal striker. And I, kind of played mostly 4-3-2-1 over the last 18 months, so just kind of getting a bit used to how the 4-3-3 sets up. I think the thing with tactics at the minute, which I'm trying to remind people of when obviously playing on next gen, is everyone obviously keeps saying about how 71 depth, and it needs to be patched, and it's really strong, which yes, it is. The thing that I think people are getting really confused with is it's not actually 71 depth that is causing the problem. When EA introduced this new AI press this year and the automatic overload ball side, which comes in on the Hypermotion, which is next generation of the game, it basically comes in, the automatic press comes in from 46 depth and above. So if you just run default 50 depth, you still get the automatic AI press. The only thing you don't get, which you then get at 71 depth and above, is the automatic offside trap. So, people are getting a little bit confused with that and they're going, oh, well, I'm running 60 depth. I don't want to, you hear it all the time, oh, you're a rat if you run 71 depth. And it's like, well, if you're still running 60 depth, you're still getting the automatic AI press. And to be honest, That's where most people are having the trouble with, because 71 depth was a thing last year for people to maintain a high line and have that automatic offside trap, because you don't want your defence, going and standing next to the goalkeeper asking him how his day's going. So you have that for that reason, but then obviously this automatic eye press has kind of caused the issue. So when you're thinking of your tactics, basically, if you want the press, run 46 depth and above. If you don't want it, run 45 depth and above, run 45 depth and below, sorry, and then you won't get the automatic AI press. It's a different conversation whether the press should be inside the depth, which it shouldn't be, but EA decided to do that for whatever reason. But for right now, that's how it is, and that's something to keep into account when you are kind of, making your tactics, whether you're using the 4-3-3 false 9 or anything else.
Yeah, I would say it does accentuate that effect, the higher depth you have, right?
Yeah.
So that's why people talk about the 71 depth, because of that auto offside plus that increased depth. And actually myself, I have actually increased this to 71 depth so that I can have that automatic offside. And yeah, if you're maybe a skilled player, you're going to be able to beat that auto offside. And I do have a lower depth option there as well, just in case I feel like an opponent is taking advantage of that. But it is pretty rare, I would say, even as you get to a higher tier. Josh, what about you? Are you playing the auto press or actually 71 depth specifically?
No, but I often feel in games I should be. And I don't know, like, as with most issues or glitches in the game, it's being blown out of proportion because it annoys people when they lose. And that's totally understandable. I think the problem I have with it is the lack of punishment for it. And I think I even said it when we talked about the pitch notes before the game started. The fact that there's an auto press on default tactics feels weird to me. Alex, I watched one of your videos you put on Twitter, and you said something I was like, that makes so much sense. Why the hell is press linked to the depth that you play your back line at? It should be an option that you go, do I want an auto press? And then you need to be we've had constant pressure, but I kind of feel like constant pressure is kids in a playground, whereas the 71 depth is more like a proper gegenpressing Jurgen Klopp team. Like they'll cut passing lanes, they'll move over into your corner. And then I saw one of the questions was about, what your players don't seem to create space. And that is another problem with the press, is that your players almost get drawn in with that press and they don't try and spread out and give you passing lanes and stuff. And I do use it. I do have, like, of my 5 tactics, I like having one tactic and then 4 variations of it from attacking to defending, depending on what I need in a game, rather than having multiple different formations. And I do find myself switching into the 71 depth when I'm losing, and I do find it helps me in games. And I just feel it's a little bit cheap, but I do understand. Like, I don't know. It's one of those things where I do want it to be patched. I do want it to be lessened a little, but I also don't want to go back to a game where someone could just hold the ball for half an hour and it's very difficult to get it off them without having to turn constant pressure on.
There's no negative to running it, really, right? Yes, your players will step up and you have more aggression, which obviously, yes, the opponent can, look for over the top through balls, can drive down the wing, and there are ways around it. It's not completely like this crazy thing, but it is pretty strong. What's making me laugh is that people don't like this. Oh, the press is so bad. But then, haven't we had people moaning over the last few years about people playing drop back and having, 10 men behind the ball all the time? And I'm like, so what do we want? Do we want people pressing, or do we want people sitting deep? Because you're never going to just get in between, right? It's never just going to be this completely neutral, balanced kind of setup. So that's where I'm a little bit like, I don't know what people want.
I'm like, bring on the press, man.
Yeah.
Like, I don't actually find there to be like any real issue. Like, I don't, it doesn't feel like that crazy to play out. Here's the thing. If you are bad at playing out of this press, you need to learn how to use your right bumper, or need to learn how to use R1. R1 is the easiest way to play out of the press, like, period. If that is what you struggle against the most, start tapping R1. And what it's going to do is it's going to cause all of your players that are even close to the player you have with the ball to, like, basically start sprinting towards you and give you an easy passing option. And then you could just play out of it. You can like 1-2 past attackers. You could do all sorts of things. And when you get stuck in a corner, sometimes you just play a big pass over to the opposite wing. Sometimes you have to play back to your keeper. But like many of us here will remember the days of the 4-2-3-1 where 6 guys sat behind the ball. And that was it. You just dropped back. And it was so boring. My biggest like issue this year, and this is like maybe like an NA thing, but like the 4-3-2-1 formation, I think it functions in game in a way that it's like not meant to function, with the way the midfield, then the layer of 3 midfielders move after the layer of 3 attackers. Your team doesn't understand how to like appropriately react to that. And so it creates mismatches. But I'm all down for the press. Like, try to win the ball back.
It's interesting, actually, Japes, the point you made about calling players short relates very much to a question we had this week from Snore, saying, this is a question about player movement. Why do I get the feeling that my players are hiding? They're so often behind the opposition and unavailable for a pass. The opposition seems to mark my players so much better than the AI mark his. Trying to take advantage of the tiki-taka playstyle and possession seems so much harder than just knocking it down the wings. And I was going to ask Alex about that, which we will do right after this break. Hello, listener. An important thing to say here is that there's a 36,000 FC point giveaway going on the Patreon, and not only that, but there's a free trial as well, so you can get access and listen to support episodes for a limited window, and then if you'd like to, you can continue to stay and support for just £3 a month, and you'll get double the podcast content. There really has never been a better time to support if you've been considering doing so. And the way you can find that is by just searching Support for Weekly or following the link in the description of this podcast. You can also go to bit.ly/morepod. It'd be a pleasure to have you as a supporter of the pod. And if you consider doing so, a huge, huge thank you. Let's jump back into the podcast. Hello, welcome back after the break. Right, I asked a question before, basically about player movement, really, how to improve that. And I know, Alex, you use quite a lot of manual tools to encourage player movement, basically. And it's something that people definitely struggle with, especially because of the press. If you're not so confident on the ball, it can be difficult if, as the question asker said, your players are just kind of hiding behind, or it feels like they're hiding behind the defenders. What would you recommend people do? I mean, Japes mentioned just tapping RB, R1 to bring a player short, but there are other options too, I guess.
Yeah, there is. First of all, take a look at your tactics and the instructions that you have those players on. A lot of people will go, oh, my strikers are constantly running away and, I can't find them. The DM's just sat in front of them. And it's like, okay, well, what have you got instructions on? And they go, well, I've got them on getting behind. And it's like, well, that's going to play a big part in that. So just taking a look at, what setups you have on your players. If you wanted to bring some wingers on to come short, you could do that as well. Having a little bit of a play around for yourself and kind of seeing what you like and what you don't like. For me, it's all about manual sort of stuff. The AI movement in this game isn't the greatest. It hasn't been for a very, very long time. And, we could sit here and say it's not very good and, just carry on moaning about it, but we could try and do something about it. And the way we can do something about it is manual stuff. So like Japes said, tap in R1 when pointing your left stick, particularly when you get the ball with your fullback. You'll have your left stick pointing forwards anyway, because you're probably going to be moving towards, obviously, the opponent's goal. So you tap that R1 button, pointing your left stick at them, that'll bring the winger short. Then it will bring the opposing fullback in with that, because they will carry on following their player. Then you can tap L1 and then your winger will go in behind and you might be able to catch the fullback out and then you can play the ball in behind. You can double tap the R1 button to bring multiple players short, like Jape said. You can use things like creative runs, where if you tap L1, say to send your striker or your midfielder on a run, but then you flick your right analog stick towards, the person that's on the ball, that player will then come short. You can do it with R1 as well. It really doesn't matter. And then your other option, which is probably my personal favorite, is player locks, where, if you've got a second on the ball, a very, very quick left stick, right stick in, it will change the icon above that player's head. You then need to right stick switch to whoever it is that you want to move into. I'll use it a lot when I have the ball, say with my right centre back. I'll left stick, right stick in, switch over to my left winger, pull them away from the fullback, basically back in slightly, and then I'll look for that lob pass for square and just manipulate the movement in the way that I want, because if I'm relying on the AI to do it, they're not going to do what I want to do. So using all sort of those tools will give you that advantage, and just kind of remembering it's certain patterns, right? So if I get the ball with a fullback, just doing that simple thing of tapping the R1 short, then tapping the L1, maybe going into your centre mid who might have the long ball pass play style, then looking for that over the top through ball into them, and just kind of giving yourself loads of different avenues to kind of make your way out of that press and have movement where you want. And the big one right now is people are saying how strong cutbacks are and so on. When you get into the 18-yard box to look for that, sweat off across, a lot of the times your attackers just kind of disappear. They kind of go, I'm not too sure about that one. I'm just going to hide behind this Van Dijk. I'm not going to get ahead of him. Again, that's where player locks just have to come in, get the ball out to the byline, switch over to the man at the back post or the person in the middle, and then just, kind of look for that sweat off across. So multiple different ways to kind of get round what isn't a great AI system, but that will kind of help.
Yeah, and with player lock, do you think, is it too dangerous to use that in defense, do you think, for players who are kind of not super confident with it, or do you think that it is something that can work?
It's one of them where, if you're saying, right, I'm going to start learning player locks, probably don't go and do it with your centre back like for the first time. But as you when you get it with your full back, you got to remember when we're playing out of the press, the people that are always the most free on this game are your fullbacks. So those actually are the opportunities where you have probably a second to 2 seconds on the ball quite freely with your fullback. So you could play lock into the winger, you could play lock into your centre mid to move your centre mid deeper, pull them almost back into centre back to then pass for the ball. And when the opponent sees that change of icon, they're going to do one or two things. They're either going to press the ball holder to try and stop the pass altogether, or they're going to go and follow you with whoever you've switched to. So then all you do is you go, okay, great. You've now moved a player out of position. I'm going to press both my analog sticks back in and just carry on with that original ball holder. And you've just manipulated the opponent's kind of team and shape into ways that you want and just give yourself those different opportunities.
Yeah, you did mention fullbacks being important. Do you think it's important that they're good fullbacks on the ball? Is someone like Kyle Walker not particularly preferred for that reason? Or do you think you're kind of going to get away with it with someone like him?
I despise Kyle Walker with a passion. He's quick, he's strong.
That's good, me too.
Yeah, but he can't dribble, he can't pass. He's not one of my preferred. As I said, because I basically run like an SBC account, I don't get the luxury of using, I've been using 𝘱𝑒𝑟 at right back for most of the time. I've been stuck with 𝗟𝘆 at left back for a very long time and just got him out. So yeah, so there is certain elements where player profiles is something I talk about a lot, just understanding what that player's good at and what they're bad at and just playing into those strengths, So, for example, when we spoke about Morientes, he's all right on the ball, but he's not a great player profile. How do I want to use him? I want to use him in the air. If you get Kyle Walker, it's about just getting the ball off, giving it into your Frankie de Jong in the middle, and then using him to try and pass the ball and play the ball out and, out dribbling on that press, not using Kyle Walker to, dribble all the way forward. But I would say, I think fullbacks in themselves, you can actually carry the ball 10 to 15 yards up to the halfway line, most of the times quite freely because people don't press them like that aggressive. So it doesn't really matter who you've got in that area, just kind of running up the pitch, gaining territory, and then going from there.
I'm going to just quickly add to that. The fullback that terrifies me the most that I come up against, that I'm just like, this is not going to be fun, is 𝘧𝘂 𝗵𝘀𝘀𝘀, the French hero. She's like 45K, and I don't know why. You look at her stats and you're like, she's not that crazy. She tackles everything. She runs for days, but her dribbling feels so much better. So much better than it should be. And I think it's because she has press proven and quick step. And so every time that I play against that card, she just feels like she runs rampant. Every time I play against Kyle Walker, there are a couple times that I'm like, yeah, I shouldn't have played an over top through ball. But never am I like, oh no, Kyle Walker's just going to magically spin around and hit an insane pass forward that's going to break my entire line. So the point about your fullbacks always being open, when they're always open, you want players that are going to be useful on the ball when they receive it. And I don't think Kyle Walker is top of that list.
The advice there, Japes, if you come up against Bompasta, I did it the other week. I played against Bompasta and Inform 𝘠𝘠. I put Virgil van Dijk at right wing, and I can't remember who I had at striker. I moved the striker to left wing, and basically all I did was I didn't even play a lock, just L1 square to the back post. And Bompasta's 5'4". I think 𝘠𝘠's the same. Yeah. and they just don't win the headers. Like, obviously, it's just simple maths. Like, they just do it all the time. In the end, the opponent had to go and sub off the fullbacks and bring on like centre backs because they just couldn't do it.
Yeah. I definitely hear you. I mean, I it's certainly something to do, but I think for me, from like a purely like attacking sense, she's
very good,
really, really good going forward. Especially.
So if we switch it round, like I know we're getting on, so maybe to wrap up, one of the questions I see all the time is about defending R1 dribbling, and I wonder if you have any tips for defending R1 dribbling.
For me, it's kind of identifying when you look at a typical back four and you got like your CDMs, where is the space where the opponent's going to try and weave through? So I think about R1 dribbling as like a snake basically going forward. They're always going to kind of go in like those weaving sort of motions. It's not about, those quick fancy turns. It's about driving at you, having runners in front of you to trigger runners, and then just carry on driving. And that's where it's really, really scary for an opponent to defend. So when you can kind of think about where is that little bit of almost the lanes where they're going to try and move into, you are then going to take that gamble and step in on it. Double teaming up on it and having some second man press, so they cover one angle, you cover the other, and then when you actually go for the tackle, R1 circle, RBB tackles, I think are really good at dealing with it. What they are is just a strong power tackle. You commit to a bigger animation, which means that you're taking out the game for a little bit longer. But basically, you either win the ball, you either take the player and you don't win the ball and you give away a foul, whatever, it is what it is. But even if it, you win the ball, and then the ball bounces back to the opponent, because the challenge is so much more physical and stronger, the opponent normally ends up getting put off balance, which then means they can't just keep running at you. Basically, they almost have to, pick themselves back up and then go again. And if you combine that, obviously, with then second man press, normally you've got an extra player there. It's defending isn't about you winning the ball every single time. It's about just trying to cut out angles and trying to cut out areas to then force them to go into the less dangerous areas, and they recycle back, and then you go again, and then you have your numbers behind the ball. So the R1 circle tackles are definitely something for me that I think are very good at dealing with it. But I will say that it is difficult.
Yeah, I will say there's like a really great point right there. And I fall prey to this all the time of wanting to win the ball back very, very quickly. And so what it means is I put my players in like risky positions to try to bait my opponent into like making a pass, or like 50-50, I'll be able to block the pass down the wing. And if I don't, then my opponent has like a 3v2. The smarter play for me is to just like back up, mark the run, and make him slow down and let my midfield recover. And I don't think people let their midfield recover enough. I think it's like part of the shtick of where people could really, really improve.
Definitely. A good place to wrap up. Some really excellent tips there. Very, very much a pleasure to have you on, Alex. Where can people find you for even more gameplay-related tips?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on again. Greatly appreciated. If anyone wants to learn anything more, you can come on over into our Twitch stream, twitch.tv/AlexBee official. We're live 12 p.m. UK time on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sundays.
Nice. And that's AlexBee, right?
That's it,
Not
indeed.
Alex, just a bit, yeah.
Yeah, the normal AlexBee was taken, so.
Like buzz.
Like a buzzing bee,
Yeah. Because he's always buzzing, that's why, yeah. And we should say thank you to our final two guests, who are, of course, JoshXLS. Thank you very much. People can find you on Twitter/X, of course, if they'd like to.
Yes, yeah, JoshXLS_. So I'm there all the time, but yeah, I'm posting a little bit more than I have done before. Just I'm getting into a few nooks and crannies in the game that I'm enjoying. Obviously, when Evos come out, I'm trying to find the most overpowered player that you can make, but not that's already gold, but has gone through about 15 different evolutions that no one's done. But I just find it a fun part of the game.
Yeah, I've been enjoying that actually. And thank you very much as well to Japes for sharing that tactic as well. Very much appreciated.
Of course, Ben, happy to share, glad to chat about it. As a quick final thing, for a basically free SBC that is well worth doing, that Aaron Cuthbert road to the knockouts, the Chelsea women's player, is wild as far as like what her stats and her play styles are. So also my understanding, while I don't follow the women's game particularly closely, is that Chelsea has a very real chance to get like +2 upgrades quite quickly.
Tips right till the end on the FUT Weekly podcast. Thank you, Japes. And thank you very much to all those listeners out there listening in. Remember, you can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from, and on YouTube. You can subscribe there, leave a comment. It definitely helps out. And thank you very much. We a little while ago, I forgot to mention it, we hit over 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is great, especially because obviously most people don't tend to catch the pod on YouTube. Good to hit that. And of course, thank you very much as well if you're a supporter, keeping the podcast going, getting an extra podcast every week. It is greatly appreciated. And a big thank you to those icon patrons: Dave B, Hugh J, Darren W, Alistair M, Don P, Rob P, Jeff B, Damon H, Tom B, Adam G, Neil P, Alex M, Jake S, Dan W, Roger D, Lee A, Andrew C, Nishant, Waterman, Dylan H, Adam R, Rob L, Brendan W, Michael K, David G, Jimmy K, Michael B, Aditya S, and Joshua K. Plus a special thanks to Luke M, Dave B, Hugh J, Tom M, Darren W, and Pato Foot for advice and production assistance. Before I leave you, just one more thing to add though. FIFA's a bit like life really, it has its many ups and its many downs. If you're having a few more downs than ups in real life in these more difficult times, then please don't feel that you're alone or need to struggle on without taking action. If you go to thecalmzone.net, there's loads of resources, advice, support, or even just a friendly chat for anyone who needs it. If it sounds like it could help you, then head over to thecalmzone.net. And for now, have a good one, and I'll catch you on the next podcast.